2. You're clear.
Good afternoon and welcome to HamiltonRadio.net. We are also broadcasting through Facebook Live. If you are on Facebook Live, you can type questions and we will make sure to get to them toward the end of the program. With me today is Crystal, a courageous New Jersey parent. Crystal is an outstanding advocate for children all around the country. She has been especially vocal here in New Jersey. Some of you may have seen her on Fox News. We are fortunate to have you with us today. Welcome and thank you for being my guest, Crystal.
Thank you, Dr. NACE, for having me on.
Yes, so we're going to talk about a topic that's sensitive to a lot of parents in New Jersey. And I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story with us because I know that this is a personal story for you. The topic today is gender dysphoria. And for those of you who don't know what gender dysphoria is, here's a definition. So according to the American Psychiatric Association, gender dysphoria involves a conflict between a person's physical gender and the gender with which he or she identifies. It can change the way a person wants to express themselves as it relates to influencing the way that they dress and self-image and other things as well. So starting from the beginning, Crystal, can you please describe your son, because that's who we're going to talk about today, you and your relationship with your son. Can you please describe your son as a young child? How was he socially? And did he have all of the attributes of a typical male boy?
Yes, well, my son, typical from the age of 1 year old. Typical boy, rough and tough, loved to play sports, was on the soccer teams, wrestling team, football teams, played with action figures. So never did I have a concern. Always wanted to wear, the Power Ranger shirts. He would go to the store and pick out, I remember him picking out this outfit. It was red with Power Rangers on it, so always wanted to present as a typical boy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So fast forward, he is older, he goes to college, or he's getting ready to go to college. And when it came time for your child to go to college, what was that process like for you and your family?
Well, it was always, him and I were very close. He's always asked for my opinion on things. And we went through the college process together. He specifically asked me in 8th grade to attend the Catholic high school in our area because he felt that he would get a better education than the public school that was in our district. So I made it work financially. It was rough, but I made it happen. And so when it came time to pick colleges, we went through them all together. We waited for all the acceptances and to come through. And then, of course, there were a couple denials. But we looked at the financial aid package to see what made sense. And when we looked at everything, he said that he felt good attending Rutgers University in New Brunswick. So we went to the open house. We did everything. It was a lot of fun. It really was. Watching him, take his SATs. It was just a lot of fun.
So it was a typical college process that any parent would go through with their child.
Yes.
Just typical. And so, and so during this process, he was excited. He didn't show any signs of having any issues, right? He was just a typical American boy ready for college. Okay.
Yes.
And so can you describe your son's outlook in terms of his grades? It seems that he was really involved in school. If he said to you, listen, Mom, I want to go to a Catholic high school because I think I'll have a better opportunity academically. this is a kid who's like really into his academics. He's really involved in school.
Yeah, I mean, he excelled. He got really good grades. Never did a teacher come to me with any concerns. So, and I wasn't the type of parent to push him and say, look, you've got to get this and this, you've got to get these grades. I was just seeing what came from him, and I just supported him as to what he can do. And when he shows me that he wants to excel, of course, I support him. And I was there at, the award ceremony, the sports banquets. I was always there, supporting him.
Awesome. So you had a great relationship with your son. Were you guys in frequent contact with one another when he first went off to college? How often did you speak to him?
Yeah, it was really hard when he went off. I remember his face as I left him at the dorm, and it was like, oh my, like, this is it, mom's leaving. and so I communicated, I kind of like, wanted to give him some space to find himself. So, maybe we texted 1 or 2 times a week. And, but, later, it was like maybe 3 or 4 times a week. I would just say, hey, what's going on? How you doing? I just want to make sure that everything's okay. Because, they get so involved, you forget about the parents.
True, which they're supposed to do, right? At some point, you let go and you just kind of let them do, what it is they do as young people. So he went away. He had the typical reaction to being away from home for the first time. So something happened while he was at college, and I would love for you to walk the audience through exactly what you and he experienced.
Okay, so, I'm just going to go back a little bit, only because I think this also played a role in things that were going on in my son's head later in life. Around the age of 14, 15, I separated from my ex-husband, and I believe that was traumatic for my son. He understood the circumstances and why I needed to make that decision. But at the same time, it's traumatic for a kid. And I'm finding that a lot of children that do identify with a gender confusion have some sort of trauma in their lives. And so while he's away at college, a couple other things occurred. And I just think that this affected him. Now, he tells me, I found this out, later, while around the age of 21, he tells me that back when he was 15, and I'm putting the pieces together, this was around the time of the separation, he started to look online and get information on the gender dysphoria, the transgenderism. He started visiting websites, which I did not know at the time. Here I'm thinking I have a good relationship with my son, and he's doing this behind closed doors. So this is where he got involved, communicating with people in regards to transgenderism on the internet. And that's what opened the door. And that, kids at that young age, they really don't know where they belong, or they feel a little funny about things happening in their bodies, and they feel awkward. So he was obviously out there trying to find answers. I was, unfortunately, he should have come to me or his father, but he did not. And so this makes me kind of like, oh gosh, what did I do wrong? But so when he got to college, he was introduced to social justice organizations, and he started communicating with people in the social, they call them the social justice warriors. And and he found out how easy it is to change from one gender or sex to another. And when he was younger, he thought that it wasn't an option because it was too expensive. It wasn't something affordable. But once he got to college and saw all these organizations and the possibilities, he decided to go down that route. And so that's pretty much what happened. And then after that, our relationship just went downhill.
So looking back in hindsight, do you think the messaging that a lot of kids receive through television, through other media outlets, the fact that now it's being sort of glorified in a way, and let's face it, kids get a lot of attention when they're transitioning, the counselors that come out of the woodwork. Also, the counselors tend to push the parents away. The parents don't seem to be able to counsel their own children and ask the appropriate questions like, are you sure you want to do this? Is it something that you saw on TV, perhaps? That kind of thing. So because of all the attention that these kids get, do you think that plays a role in them transitioning?
Yeah, these kids are obviously looking for something because obviously they were unhappy with who they were and now are looking to change, physically who they were by changing their name, changing the way they look. So obviously they're looking for something. And here you have people that glorify it and acknowledge it and think that it's the greatest thing. But meanwhile, they're not talking about the hormone therapy that these children are being sterilized. When you take a young kid and you give them puberty blockers, it sterilizes them. They are led down in the path of having surgeries where they're removing healthy body parts. Young girls are having mastectomies, hysterectomies. And it's like nobody talks about this. And here they are, even the elected officials, because what I found out was I was trying to get my son help with therapy because I explained to him that you just cannot just change and just take some hormones without finding out the real reason why you aren't happy with your body. Mm-hmm. So I went to maybe 5 to 8 therapists asking if they could please help my son feel comfortable in his body. Even the college campus therapist at Rutgers, I asked her to please help him feel comfortable in his body. And she said she couldn't do that because of the New Jersey conversion therapy law. So what ended up happening was Governor Christie,
let's back up a little bit, Crystal, because in New Jersey conversion therapy law, there are some parents out there who may not know what that is. And that was introduced and put into law by Chris Christie when he was in office. And together now with this LGBT curriculum, the combination of the two is a horrible cocktail.
Definitely.
You can't give your kid help if your child comes home and says, I want to transition. You can only get them counseling in one direction.
Right. So when the therapist at Rutgers said, no, I can't help him feel comfortable in his body because that's considered conversion therapy and that's illegal in New Jersey. So that's when I started to research the law and I found out that if a child says they feel like they're born in the wrong body and they want to transition, you cannot talk a child out of changing. You can only guide them through the process of changing from one sex to another. When I read this, I said, what? So you can't tell a child, wait a minute, why do you feel uncomfortable? And look into underlying issues, look into, because children with this gender dysphoria sometimes have ADHD or are highly sensitive or they're gifted kids. You can't find out and get to the root of why they feel this way, but you can lead them down a path of transition, which...
And let me ask you this. So if you have a child who's underage in New Jersey and they start saying, let's say you have a boy and he says, I want to be a girl. I think I want to be a girl. As a parent, are you telling me that you can't ask the right questions? And what will happen if you go down that path? Is there a penalty?
Honestly, you'd have to take your kid out of the state and get them some therapy, probably in another state, because you're not going to find it here in New Jersey. The only counselor that I found that was willing to help me was a Christian counselor who basically told my son he needed to slow down. And, you know, they can't call it conversion therapy because, you know, then it wouldn't be allowed. But he's only allowed to speak to, he would only be allowed to speak to a pastor or like the Christian counselor just wanted to get to the bottom of why he just felt uncomfortable. Not touch on changing him, just kind of give him some guidance as to why he's so unhappy. Because when he filled out his questionnaire with that counselor, she's like, wait, you got a lot of issues going on here. We need to look at some of these issues before we even touch on the gender dysphoria. But of course, he was so upset. He refused to go back and see her. And that's when he got involved with the doctor and the therapist on staff at Rutgers, because they were going to give him what he wanted. So parents, beware. This doesn't just start in college. This also begins in K through 12. Because what school districts are doing now is they are providing something called safe spaces. I don't know if many parents have heard of that, but you certainly heard of that, Crystal. They are providing safe spaces in schools, which really says to kids, your safe space is not in the home. It's here. It's somewhere else. So you as a parent took him to get help. He didn't like what the Christian counselor was telling him, so he went to a safe space, which was back on the campus. That's right. And you know, doing my research, Rutgers University made it very easy for him to get hormone prescription because sex changes are included in the Rutgers healthcare plan for students. So if you go onto their website and you look at trans health, you will see that sex changes is covered under the student healthcare policy. And
so
this made it.
Did you have to purchase that policy?
No,
like, did you purchase it for him?
Yeah. So listen to this. He had his own health insurance with me, okay? And my health insurance did not cover hormone treatment. They didn't cover transgender health, okay? So he couldn't get it through my insurance. So what ended up happening was, since he was a full-time student at Rutgers, they said, well, we can put you on the policy for Rutgers healthcare and not even charge him just because he was a full-time student. So he was able to get all the services, the endocrinologist, the doctor, the blood work, the therapist, all that was covered by the Rutgers healthcare plan, and he didn't have to pay anything. Maybe he paid a small copay for the medicine, but I certainly wasn't going to pay for anything, but he found a way around it.
And the college helped him. They facilitated him in finding that out.
Of course, yes.
Interesting. Did they ever contact you at any point, Rutgers University, to say your child's here on campus and he's going through some difficulties? Did they ever pull you into any of those conversations?
No, they wouldn't do that. When I went to the doctor's office, wanting to speak to her, and I sent her an email that I wanted to speak to her, and she was very short with me. And said, I can't talk to you. You're going to have to talk to your son. I'm like, oh, excuse me, you know, because I guess the patient, whatever, privacy. So I wasn't going to get any information from her. So in my attempts to help my son, I asked him if he would at least fill out a form where I can at least talk to his therapist. So he gave me that. Because, you know, he was looking for me to accept what he was saying, but at the same time, all these years of our relationship, he was at least giving me that. that he allowed me to talk to his therapist. So that's when I had the an hour one-on-one consultation with the therapist. I told her about his past, his history, family issues. That's when she told me about the conversion therapy. And she basically said to me, well, why are you so scared about transition? I'm like, what? Why am I scared? Because my son is going to be taking these hormones. They're going to damage his body. He might decide to go into surgery, removing body parts.
Right.
And you're going to ask me why I'm so concerned.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was in contact with the therapist maybe about 3 or 4 months. And then I found out that regardless, my son didn't care what I said because he started taking the hormones anyway.
Was it a case of the more you pushed for him not to take the hormones, the more he was driven toward them? Because a lot of times that happens with you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that. It was kind of what I find with many other parents, because I do speak to a lot of parents whose children, young adults, have done this. And for some reason, they get very hostile. They get very, my son got very aggressive and hostile with me because I wouldn't accept him being a girl. And I wouldn't call him by his pronouns. And I wouldn't call, and because he's hearing from other people, well, if they don't accept you, you have to cut them out of your life. You know, he hears all these lies and all these, your parents don't love you, or else they would accept you for who you are, but, during this time, never once did I stop saying, I love you, because I do love him. I would go to his house and bring him, something I cooked, or bring him some snacks, or buy him a pizza, just telling him I love him. I've always welcomed him home for the holidays. So he's always come back for the holidays, because I just want him to know he's got a place, and he's got to understand, as an adult, we're not going to agree on everything, but he at least has to respect and not, not have a fit or show, or be aggressive. I mean, after all, I am his mother. So I'm going to love him even though I don't like the decisions he's making. Like I've always made this example, if your older child, let's say somebody in their 30s and they're married and they're being disrespectful to their wife, or they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, a family member that cares is going to say to that person, hey, wait a minute, maybe you need to, do this, or you need to get some help, or, a loving person is always going to step in and say something.
Absolutely.
I'm not just going to let him, run around, and I get so upset with a therapist that, it's like so sad. It's like you're actually letting my son believe that he can be a woman and walk around town like, looking like that. That's like so sad. It's like, you don't do that to somebody.
But he's not the only one. And what do you see in New Jersey's future, where we are unfolding this LGBT curriculum for kids at a very early age, starting in middle school right through high school, in every single subject. It's not just, I think some parents out there believe that this is just going to be like a one-course thing. No, it's going to be embedded in reading, writing, science, social studies. It's a total indoctrination. And so, what can parents expect? What do you can expect?
So, this is why there's a group here in New Jersey. We're called Team PYC, for Protect Your Children. And I joined their efforts because they are going around to different school boards, and we're attending meetings. And we're also a prayer group as well. But, you don't have to be involved in the prayer group. You can just be involved in the activism, excuse me.
Activism, yes.
And so we're going around telling people how this LGBT curriculum that was signed into law by Governor Murphy is going to hit the schools in September of 2020. And currently right now, because, we're home, we're all, staying home now, or else there were 12 pilot schools that were already starting the program. But currently right now, I don't know where that was left off because of the COVID-19. But
it's almost like, thank God for the COVID-19. So these are the 12 schools. I'm just going to read the 12 schools that have already started piloting. They are Dr. Martin Luther King Middle School in Asbury Park, the Forestdale School in Rumson, Haddon Heights Junior and Senior High Schools, Highland Park Middle School, Highland Park School, Milburn Middle School, Newark Arts High School, and there are a few more on the list. Just to give viewers an idea that this is already underway. It started in January as a pilot program, and they are supposed to go into all of the schools in September, correct?
Yes, all of them in September 2020. So we are out there seeing if this can be revoked, because once you bring this into the school, and it's indoctrinating our children. It's making them think that this is a normal way of life. And once you introduce the transgenderism and the gender confusion, children start to wonder, oh, maybe if there's a girl that likes football, that maybe she might be a boy because she likes these typical boy things, or she doesn't like to wear a dress, or she wears a baseball cap. So you're feeding this information to the children, telling them, well, maybe because you do this, maybe you're really this. And what's happened was, with the parents that I speak to, is sometimes when this transgenderism was introduced into schools, whether it was in the auditorium, they had a presentation, like all of a sudden now kids start to identify that they are transgender. And then when let's say you have a little clique of girls, when one starts to identify, then the other one starts to identify the same, and you have like this social contagion. So here, these schools are bringing this into the school, and they don't realize the damage and the confusion this causes our children. And it's not just, oh, you think you're a boy, well, cut your hair. It's all the other crazy stuff that the drugs, the surgeries, all these other things that come with it. It's not just, oh, you can just dress up in this and then you're fine. It's all the other stuff that comes with it. So you're not just letting a girl be whatever kind of girl she wants, or a boy. If a boy is a little feminine, so what? Just leave the kids alone.
Let them grow into who they're going to be. I wrote about that in my book, Top-Down Confusion, as you know. And I think there are so many ways that we can teach kids to be inclusive, because this is the argument that they're not inclusive enough. We can teach children to be inclusive without bringing all these sexual references into play, into the classroom, because they really don't have any place there, So in terms of the pharmaceuticals and the changes, do you know of anyone, because now I'm sure parents are seeking you out who are in similar situations, what kind of stories are you hearing in terms of girls changing their bodies and boys changing their bodies?
Yeah, I have this one mother who, at the age of 14, her daughter ran away, went to another state, had a mastectomy, and later on, a couple years later, had a hysterectomy. I have a few other parents that I know of in college circumstances where their kids were prescribed hormones while away at college. And some of the parents that I'm involved with,
are you looking to become a better leader, whether that's in business, in sports, or in life, and you haven't found a book yet to help you?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I heard something on my...
Getting some interference.
Okay. So I heard, you know, some of the parents that I'm involved with, we meet once a month. It's a private group. You have to, you know, be vetted very well in order to get into this group, because, you know, we're sought, you know, people look for us to, you know, call us names. So we have to keep it on the low. And, you know, these parents that have kids that are between 12 and 16, you know, they're just keeping their kid off. They're not giving their kid any hormones. You know, they're keeping their kid off because they know that's not the route to go. They don't want their children's bodies to be harmed. So I do have a lot of parents that I know that are, you know, struggling with, you know, their kids not feeling comfortable in their body, having no place to have therapy in New Jersey. They have to go out of state to talk to a therapist. And and so, you know, if they still have their kid at home, they have a really good chance of their kid not going down that road. You know, once you send them off to college and they're 18, it's like there's not much you can do. There are a lot of stories now of people, they're called detransitioners. These are people that, you know, took the hormones, may have had surgeries, but now they're starting to come out and speak out. So they're Walt Heyer is one. He's an older man also. He's got a couple books out. I had the honor of meeting him. He is a man who lived as a woman for many years and then went back to being a man.
I know his story. Yeah. And so what are some of the things that he shared with you about transitioning and then detransitioning?
You know, it's pretty much, it's going to be, everybody has their own time. You know, I communicate with people who detransition, and it's just a matter of it clicking, you know, and sometimes it goes, you know, sometimes it clicks and they see the light, and, you know, sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. But, you know, I believe that in time my son will realize. You know, I pray that he'll get some therapy that he needs. And I just feel that, you know, at some point, you know, it's not all rosy like they say. You know, they come out in the pride parades, everybody's woohoo, you know, all love and they think everything's great. But these are people that are really suffering, and it's just cruel to do these things to their bodies.
Yeah.
And,
but it's also a sort of cruelty to parents as well, Crystal. You know, I have a person I know, I won't say she's a friend, but I know her, and her son is transitioning. He's about, I guess, 19. I don't know how old your son is, but this young man's about 19. He started transitioning in high school. And what the counselor told her and her husband was that if you don't go along with this, if you keep resisting, you're going to push your child into suicide.
That's a lie. They back you into a corner.
But is that a typical response from counselors to parents?
Oh yeah. That's why I was so scared when I left that therapist's office, because she basically backed me into a corner saying that if I didn't support him, he would kill himself. And, you know, I'm like, well, you know, if he's going to kill himself, he's got some other issues. It's not just this. Because and that's why it's unfair not to look into underlying issues. So, yeah, my son has threatened me like that. He has said that to me, that he would. So what did I do? I called the ambulance and I had them take him to the hospital. Because, you know, you're gonna say that to me, then obviously you need to be looked at. So he wasn't happy about that. But, you know, what I mean, you tie my hands. What am I supposed to do? You know, so.
But for counselors to do that to parents, I think it's a nasty, very deceptive tactic, you know, because parents, as a parent, you wear your heart on your sleeve for your children, And here someone says you're going to be the one who makes this child commit suicide if you don't go along with this.
And that's very unfair, because see, all of what I was finding was that all of the therapists in New Jersey were being trained by WPATH, Standards of Care. WPATH stands for World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and they have a standards of care. And all the therapists in New Jersey were being trained by this. Now, you know, when I read this was like, like a couple of years ago. You know, I went through the whole thing, this whole standards of care, and it didn't make sense to me. But they're all the therapists are being told the same thing, and this is why, you know, we hear the suicide thing, which, you know, it's going to come out eventually that it's false. You know, that because, you know, my son, regardless, he's still doing well. He doesn't talk about killing himself.
That's great.
You know?
Good. So that means he's becoming stronger, and maybe he's still a child. You know, they go off to college, but they're still kids. And
what did they say about, like, the frontal cortex isn't developed till, I think, 24?
Yeah.
You know, so at that age, you know, then you start to say, whoa, wait a minute, you know. So I'm holding out hope for the development.
Well, I'm holding out hope with you and praying for you as well. And so what was the most shocking thing you learned from going through this process with your son, having the college actually cultivate this change, this transition, and help him fund it? What were some of the most shocking elements for you in all this?
Well, the fact that they did this, the fact that I wrote a letter to President Robert Barchi expressing my concerns, and I hear back from him saying, you know, I hope your relationship with your child gets stronger through the years. You know, just total disregard of underlying issues, family past history. They wouldn't listen to anything. His health past, you know, wouldn't listen to anything. And then as I got into this whole agenda, finding out that girls as young as 8 years old are being injected with testosterone, about the surgeries, it was just horrifying. And to know that, you know, this is something that, you know, it's like my beautiful son, you know, I took care of him. He's my baby. And to know that he's being harmed, it was just devastating. So that's why I set out to, I told Robert Barchi, I said, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep opening my mouth. I'm going to talk to anybody and everybody who will listen to me. Because what you did, there was an injustice to my son, and I'm going to make sure that I get the word out what Rutgers University did to my kid, and so that's why I started my blog, NewJerseyMama.net, and my whole story is in there. Some of the letters that I wrote, I believe the letter that I wrote to Senator Oraho is there. The letter to Robert Barchi is there. The New Jersey conversion therapy law is in there. So it's just a ton of information that I've gotten in the past couple years, and I've just been putting everything there. So when I share my story, you know, I share my blog, and everybody knows what's happened and what's happening in New Jersey. And a few of the interviews that I've done are on there as well. So, yeah, what was I going to do? The sense, the fear that I had in the first 2 weeks of finding out and not being able to sleep, I just can't have another parent not know what's going on. So
absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being here. Absolutely. And you know, there's so many different things going on in New Jersey with our kids. I'm just going to run a couple of numbers past the listening audience. So the New Jersey Department of Education released the end of the year They call them summative test scores. At the end of the year, they test each, students. You guys, all of us have been tested in New Jersey if we went to school here at the end of the year. And so, these are the big tests for teachers. They want to know what level kids are reading at, what level they can do math at, et cetera. So the latest scores are from 2018 to 2019. So in Newark Public Schools, only 36.3% of students pass the English language arts section of the test, right? That speaks to how well they can write, how well they can read, comprehend material, et cetera. Camden Public Schools only scored 16.7% of the students there. Total body of students, only 16.7 passed the English language arts section. And then in Salem Public Schools, only 21.2% passed the English language arts section. So here we're going to implement an LGBT history curriculum to students who can barely comprehend just normal everyday material. You talk about an indoctrination, there's no better example than this right here. And so, our money could better be spent, our resources could better be spent. Garden State Equality has now offered, and I want people who are listening to please go into the Garden State Equality website, because they are the ones rolling out the curriculum in the state of New Jersey. They plan to go into every single school in September. But oddly enough, we have a governor, follow this, we have a governor who created a law, came out in 2019, said we're going to roll this out next year in 2020, which we're here now, right? He gave the task, pretty much gave it to Garden State Equality to create the curriculum. They did that in 1 year's time, a curriculum that could cause gender dysphoria, which is what we're talking about here today. Now I sat on a committee that wrote curriculums many times. It takes years, people, to write a good writing curriculum or reading curriculum. How do you create something that could cause serious permanent harm to children in really less than a year? Okay? Because now they're piloting. They started piloting a year later. Where did they just slapped the curriculum together with no input from the New Jersey Department of Education. So here you have a governor who mandates that kids be taught LGBT history. Then he tells the State Department to stand down because the State Department of Education is not involved in this curriculum. If you go onto their website, you will find no curriculum standards. They didn't even bother to write standards for this curriculum. So this gay organization, Garden State Equality, is going to just come in, write a really quick curriculum, throw it together, and test it out for a couple of months in a few schools, and then all of a sudden they're going to roll it out to all of the children in the state of New Jersey. I mean, you know, Crystal, you've been following this as much as I have. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we went, Team PYC went to the New Jersey Department of Education on my YouTube channel. I have a few of the testimonies that some of the parents testified. So that's all on my YouTube page. There's on NewJerseyMama.net, there'll be a link to YouTube so you can see how concerned parents are and what they're saying. But the New Jersey Department of Education, their hands are tied. They just have to make sure that the schools are following what Murphy said, which means to discuss the economical and social impact of LGBT, and they added in disabled. So they snuck in the word disabled, sort of just so people can say, well, look, it's about people with disabilities too. But of course, why did they lump that in with the LGBT?
Right. So, that's how they got the law passed too, was that there was a law attached to a disabilities law. The LGBT curriculum law was attached with that law. That's how they got it passed. Yeah.
Right. So, so we'll see what happens. We're we're out there. Parents are attending their Board of Education meetings, and we'll see what happens. I mean, if we can make enough noise, we were supposed to have on May 7th. We were supposed to have a demonstration at the Board of Education, but unfortunately with COVID-19, we weren't able to, have this. We were going to ask, students to join us as well. But, we'll see what happens. We'll see how it plays out. And also real quick, I just wanted to discuss, because when you say, what else can parents do? I just want to know if your listeners are familiar with the Equality Act. And that was something that the House of Representatives tried to pass. And actually they did, and it was going to go on the desk for the U.S. Senate to sign, but it hasn't gotten there yet. And the Equality Act, I went to Washington, D.C. to speak to representatives to explain to them how harmful this is. And because unfortunately, many of the Democrat elected officials are on board with this Equality Act. And you can go online and you can read about it and you can see who's for it and who's against it. But basically, the Equality Act would allow men who identify as women, they would have legal access to women and girls' locker rooms, shelters, prisons, sports teams. And also, it would also be similar to the New Jersey conversion therapy law, where a therapist can't talk a kid out of, changing their sex. So a lot of these elected officials were on board with this Equality Act. So I'm involved with the Kelsey Coalition as well, and we went to Washington to talk to our representatives. And you know what? The few representatives that did listen to us, most of them were all conservative Republican. They listened to us, and they didn't actually realize how this would affect the safety and the privacy of women and girls. So, yeah, I've been working on that too. And that's why you have to know who. Now, my representative, my congressperson, is Mikey Sherrill, and she's for this. So, and she knows exactly how unhappy I am, because I was able to. She was at a town hall, and I went up to her and I asked her, how is she going to protect the safety of women and girls by supporting this kind of legislation? And she looked at me, she had no answer. She just looked at me like dumbfounded, like, oh my gosh, this woman actually approached me. And so she's never called me back. I have probably heard from her chief of staff just saying that, that she's in support of this, whatever.
It sounds like that, they don't really think these things through.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't because they're being pushed by the social justice warriors, by, like Garden State Equality, to let them think that, well, if you don't support the LGBT community, well, then you're a bigot and you're a transphobe and you're a homophobe. And, that's not true. I was taught to love everyone, and my intentions do not come from hate. It's just, I have to protect these children that are being sent down this horrific path.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, and we all do. We all play a role in that. And we are starting a conversation today. I hope that our listeners will attach themselves to one of your projects, and just start to protest, start to ask questions. And I think some of the questions that we're not asking are, questions like this. So we have a governor, again, who has mandated this LGBT curriculum law in New Jersey. However, he did not mandate that the State Department of Education oversee it. They're saying school districts have the right to hire who they want to come in to develop the curriculum.
That's right.
Most of the school districts are choosing Garden State Equality. Garden State Equality, they're not educators, okay? It's a gay advocacy group that's writing curriculum for kids who mostly are heterosexual. So they're writing it through a gay and LGBT lens. They're not writing a curriculum through the lens of someone who's heterosexual. They're writing it through the lens of mostly people who are homosexual. Big difference. And then they're presenting this to school districts. Now think about it. Your average superintendent, your average school principal and teachers, these are not experts in the field of LGBT. So if I could come in and present a curriculum to them, and they won't know if it's a quality curriculum, if it will cause gender dysphoria. How do they make that decision on their own? See, this is where the state doesn't want to take responsibility. They deliberately did not construct the standards that they constructed for reading, writing, science, and social studies. There were no standards for anyone writing this curriculum to follow, because the state wants hands off. They know how explosive this is going to be. They know the lawsuits that are going to come. Okay? And frankly, none of us should let them get away with this. If the governor is standing behind this law, then he should put the full support of the Department of Education behind it to oversee this, to make sure our kids are not going to fall into gender dysphoria.
And I believe, because we met with Dr. Repollet, and he made it clear to us that
he's the commissioner of education, by the way.
Yes, that he doesn't. The New Jersey Department of Education does not support Garden State Equality's curriculum, but it seems, Garden State Equality has so much money that they can get out there to every school and present their curriculum to the schools. And, they look at it and they're like, oh yeah, this sounds good, and then they take it on. They're not required to take on that curriculum. So this is why we're working to get to every school board meeting to let them know you don't have to take their curriculum. It's not written in stone.
But Crystal, this is the thing. So you've gone to Dr. Repollet and he said, well, they've created a curriculum and they are presenting it to the school district. Well, we have a Department of Education specifically for that purpose, to oversee. Part of their job is to oversee curriculum in this state. And so they can't just say someone's in our schools and we don't know anything about their curriculum, but they're going to roll it out in every school pretty much in New Jersey. You don't get to say that. When taxpayers are paying the salaries of all of your thousands of employees, he should be the one. He could, with the stroke of a pen, write a letter to every single school board without you guys having to travel to every school district.
But supposedly, he doesn't, which is really sad. And, he doesn't want to go against what the governor says because, the governor's his boss.
But the governor put the seal of approval on this law. He put the seal of approval on it. So stand behind it, Governor Murphy. If you put the seal of approval on it, then go to your state Department of Education and say you need to lead this charge. Okay, if he's so confident that this is a great curriculum, then why is it that the Department of Education has hands off?
I know. And we went there thinking that the Department of Education played a role in accepting this curriculum. So we went there to plead with them to please review it and understand that this will harm our children. And this is the testimony we provided. And then we find out that, we have nothing to do with, the curriculum that Garden Equality writes. We just, we have no say. It's up to each school board to decide whether they want to take it or not.
These school boards are not experts in LGBT curriculums. None of us are. This is all brand new to everyone. So the state should logically lead this charge. The Department of Education, they have written no standards. They want hands off. They don't want the lawsuits, really. This is what it's all about, Crystal. You know that.
Yeah, you're right. And but they did tell us, you know, the when we provided testimony, the people that were there that were listening, you know, they did say that they want to hear from the public. They want letters, they want emails, they want us to reach out. So, you know, I encourage anyone listening to please reach out to the New Jersey Department of Education.
Yes,
and because they do review our letters and they want to hear from us. They were very nice, but they couldn't help us. They listened, but they couldn't help us.
You know, interesting. I think they could do better. I think they absolutely should step up and take charge of this. Step up and tell GSE to stand down.
Mm-hmm.
They need to take a look at their curriculum and their materials to make sure that it's not going to harm children and lead them into gender dysphoria and to this really high suicide group. And, you know, let's hope that some listeners out there will get those letters out to the Department of Education. Yeah. So do you have any parting words for parents who are sending their kids off to college right now?
Well, you know, I would say, of course, you know, I trusted my son, but I think maybe I trusted him a little too much. I think parents, you know, need to stay in touch with their kids, find out what clubs they're in, find out what, you know, organizations they're involved with, what classes they're taking, you know, to just be really involved. Just because they're off to college doesn't mean, you know, I kind of like let go and let them go. But I have another one going off to college, and I'm going to do things a lot differently. And I'm going to be even more involved with the classes. I want to see what classes you're taking. I want to see, you know, what groups you're involved with. Because, you know, he...
Absolutely. And what about internet access and, you know, really being on top of the internet? I did this for one of my nieces. I would just take her phone. I would take her to lunch, and I would just take the phone, and I made sure she had no password on it, and I would check it periodically. And she would say, "You're invading my privacy," and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, what privacy does she have?
Of course, yeah. You have to, especially, you know, if you have a young teen, you've got to like set the blockers on. It's so scary out there, and the messages that are coming through, and you'll see, like on the cartoons and things like that, and the crazy stuff, even on Cartoon Network. I think I had something on one of my Twitters that came through. You know, the how the indoctrination is even on like Cartoon Network, and remember all the stories about the what is that the reading the what was that called, drag queen?
Drag story hour.
Oh my God! And there are people like
libraries,
people giving them their children to, like, you know, take them and read to them. It's just like you're filling your kid up with all these things, and so just like really, I guess, you know, set the parameters, block everything.
Yeah, you have to put the effort in, you know, and it pays off in the end, right, Crystal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just like you, I also had, and I probably would have seen you at this march, but there was a march set in Philadelphia, and I believe some Team PYC members were either coordinating it or part of it, and it was to march against the first gay character to host Sesame Street. The man. Yeah,
that might have been Daryl Brooks. I was not involved with that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I was going to go out and march with them, but that was canceled because of the COVID virus and the lockdown.
Yeah.
But there's a lot happening that parents really are not aware of. It's all coming down the pike at one time and really quickly.
Yeah, so right now, you still have access to the internet. You have access to your elected officials' emails.
Mm-hmm.
You can write, send them an email, post something on social media, let them know, hey, we're not happy with what you're doing. And,
Mm-hmm.
And it does become a matter of, I'm not going to certainly vote for anyone that supports that's happening to children, so that's, some people are just a one issue voter,
mm-hmm.
And everybody has their, what they support and not support. So this, I feel really strongly about this. So I would never support anyone who is pro transitioning children.
Absolutely. So in terms of the Department of Education, there are a lot of people listening who are at home today. And please write the Department of Education and ask them to take charge, ask them to do their job, basically, to take charge of this curriculum. Because we don't want people writing curriculum willy-nilly and creating a situation where we have a slew of children who are going through gender dysphoria. And you know what the state's going to say if we don't make them step up and take charge of this? They're going to say, we didn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you, Crystal, so much for being with us today. Can our viewers find information about Team PYC on your blog?
Yeah. There should be a link to that, or in one of my articles I wrote about them. But
I love Team PYC, by the way.
Yeah,
it is a wonderful organization, and Team PYC, they have been on top of this from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And I can't keep up with everything.
And relentless. Yeah. So kudos to Team PYC. Keep up the good work.
Yep. Sounds good. And everything is on my blog, NewJerseyMama.net. So yeah, anybody can reach out to me if they need anything.
Well, happy Memorial Day to you, Crystal, and happy Memorial Day to all the listeners out there. Thank you so much for joining me. We appreciate you sharing your story with us today. Everyone listening, have a wonderful day. All right. Bye.
Bye.